Attention local government leaders, don't miss Fast Track 2025, Victoria's premier councillor leadership forum, happening Friday, May the 2nd. Join us for an intensive day focused on leading with integrity, featuring an exceptional lineup including Melbourne Lord Mayor Nick Rees, Victorian Ombudsman Marlo Barraguareth and IBAC CEO Alison Byrne. Gain valuable insights on conduct, fraud prevention and CEO management while networking with industry peers. Plus, enjoy a special keynote from comedian Anthony Lamo-Learman. Fast Track 2025, equipping you with the tools to serve your community better. Register now at the VLGA website. Hello, welcome to a special edition of the Local Government News Roundup. It's another instalment in our popular Well-Travelled Executive series, where I speak with leaders from in and around the local government sector about their career journeys, professional and personal highlights, lowlights and learnings, and in some cases we get some insights into what might be next for them in their careers. As always, the podcast is brought to you by the Victorian Local Governance Association, the national broadcaster on all things local government, with support this month from Symphony 3, Simple, Connected Customer Experiences. I hope you enjoy today's episode of the Well-Travelled Executive Series. And today I'm delighted to have someone I'd like to call a personal friend. I think I can do that. Stephen Wall, who's the CEO of Wyndham City Council, is joining me today. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Chris, and you certainly can call me that.
Great to see you. We, of course, were, for those who don't know, adjacent CEOs for a while. When you were at Maribyrnong and I was at Hobson's Bay, geez, there's been a bit happened since those days.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've been watching your work for a long time. When I was a young bloke up in Deniliquin in New South Wales, and you were a newsreader on GMV6 out of Shepparton. So I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, Chris.
Now this show's about your journey, not mine. So you've opened the door there. So you're from Denny?
Yeah, from Deniliquin up in New South Wales. Yeah. Yep, they're born and bred. And got my first local government gig when I was living in New South Wales at a council called Murray Shire, which was based in Mathara, sort of a Chukamoama, that area. Yeah. It's amalgamated. Actually, that's a bit of a consistent story that most of the councils I've worked at are gone now. They've been amalgamated or joined up or just disappeared. So hopefully I'm not the bad influence there.
You've left destruction in your wake, have you?
Apparently so.
So that's sort of Murray River Council now, which is across the border from Campaspe. Is that sort of area you're talking about? Yeah. What was the role that you had there, Steve?
My first role in local government was called Purchasing and Creditors Officer.
Right.
It was.
Sounds exciting.
And you know what? I would love to say I've got a well-orchestrated career plan that I've implemented perfectly over the journey, but I knew nothing about local government. I had 3 young children, and I had to work out how to feed them. And there was a job advertised in the local paper. I thought, that sounds interesting. I'm not too bad at maths. I could probably handle that. And the job effectively was working in the works depot, the council depot, buying all of the supplies and issuing them out. So basically the storeman. And then during the day when the works depot was empty, I'd be paying the accounts payable. I was the creditors clerk. So it was a new role to the council. And as I said, I literally applied for it because I thought, gee, this looks like a good job. And then fell into local government and just loved it. It just made sense to me. And I think like the vast majority of the population of this great country, not many people understand the roles of the 3 tiers of government that we've got here. Yeah. And certainly a lot of people don't understand what we do in local government.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like a soapbox we can get back on in just a little bit, but I want to sort of chart the journey a bit. So were you an accountant by trade at that point? Or
not at all, Chris.
No?
Not at all. When I finished school, I got a job working in a surveying company. So just labouring. So I was out, had a beautiful suntan, but outside most of the days, and a lot of surveying work. And I sort of always had interests in that engineering type field. And then look at as things went on, just needed a job and applied for that one. So didn't have the qualifications at all, and very quickly fell in love with the industry. Very quickly saw there were absolute career paths available to people in local government, and in that one organisation, got promoted into a number of different roles, over a couple of years effectively, and found myself in a financial accounting role. And the director at the time said, "I reckon you can do this job, but you really need a degree."
Right.
I said, gee whiz, well, how do I get one of those? He said, and so very quickly applied to Charles Sturt University to study part time, and I still remember the conversation with the university where I said, I need a degree, I need a business degree, and I need it fast. How quickly can I get it? And managed to get a Bachelor of Business, majoring in Human Resources Management, minoring in Accounting, and did that basically part-time but with a full-time load. So I finished that in 3 years. Before they sent me the degree in the mail, I'd applied to do an MBA, and again did that in about 12 months. So while working full-time, still trying to talk to my family and studying most nights when people were asleep, very quickly got the quals and got to the position where, I was excited by career prospects.
There's a theme developing in a lot of the conversations I've been having for this series. There's nearly always a mentor type figure who has said to someone like you have a potential career path here, but you need a qualification, and have encouraged you to do that. So it could have turned out very differently without that person pointing out that path to you, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it wasn't easy. It absolutely wasn't easy. But I had great support from the organisation I was working at. And again, I had a philosophy at that time of never saying no. So whenever there was an opportunity within the organisation, hey, we need someone to be a representative on Occupational Health Committee or a Risk Management Committee, or there's a regional group forming and we need someone to be our representative there. And just never say no, always stick up your hand. And so I learned a lot very quickly, got the qualifications very quickly, but then started applying for jobs. And, I think local government, 530 odd councils across the country, there are so many opportunities. And, if you're willing to move and, I am so lucky. I've got the best wife in the world who has followed me around the world and followed me around the country, and, has been such a great support to me, Megan, over a long period of time. And without her support and, being willing to uproot the family and chase jobs all over the country, I wouldn't be here where I am today. And, I think that, there are still fabulous careers in local government available if you're willing to work hard and take opportunities when they come.
So I want to get to the whole CEO thing in just a little bit, but where did you go from Murray Shire?
So Murray Shire, so it was interesting. Then I applied for a job up at Bow Desert Council up in Queensland, and I didn't get the job.
Right.
But funnily enough, I must have impressed at interview because the gentleman who interviewed me at the time, I can't remember his name, had a connection with a little council called Shire, which was up near Bundaberg. And again, it's an amalgamated council now as well, so another one that's gone. But I still remember the role. The role was called Manager of Finance, but it was effectively a director role. It was a part of the executive team. And I remember the ad clearly because it said, we want degree qualifications in business or equivalent, post-grad qualifications highly desirable, and 5 years minimum experience in a similar role. I had 13 subjects of a business undergraduate degree completed and no experience in the job. Yeah. But I applied nonetheless and got the job. And look, I'd be the first to admit I was way out of my depth when I got up there.
But it's often said that I don't want to get off onto gender issues, but men will do that. They'll give it a go even if they don't meet all the criteria. Whereas a lot of women will think, well, I don't tick the boxes, so I'm not going to try. So there's been a lot of work on encouraging women to be a bit more brave in that sense, hasn't there?
Oh, absolutely, and I certainly do that. I have a lot of people that come to me in various forums and just ask me, for career advice. And I say, well, I think there's three things you can do: apply. Just float your resume, test test your resume in real life experiences. And interview technique is such a critical part of it all too. You got to practice, apply, and and I certainly encourage the many women that come to speak to me who want to develop a career that be overly confident. You don't have to wait until you've got 110% of the prerequisites. I mean, sometimes, particularly some of the more remote councils, they really struggle to get high quality or high caliber of people. So there's opportunities out there if you're willing to take a risk.
So you're in Queensland. I know you end up back in New South Wales, don't you, in a town called Cobar?
Oh yeah, but there was a stop before that. So I was up in Calanshire in Queensland, and it was only a short stint. I was up there for about 12 months, but learnt an incredible amount. In fact, when I first got up to the council and the executive team was a really tight group, and I made some really great friends up there. But I remember I had 3 sets of numbers in front of me. There was an audited set of statements from the previous year. There was some reconciled accounts during the current financial year when I got up there, and there was a budget, and none of them matched each other. And it was the first time I got migraine headaches when I'm just trying to make sense of this. And numbers don't lie, Chris. They're always they always balance. And it was a really fascinating experience. But again, it was a small council struggling for resources. And again, under a lot of different pressures, as all councils have been. This is 26 years, probably 23 or 4 years ago. So it's a little while ago now.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work required at that point, and we're only up there for about 12 months. There was a whole range of reasons. We finally worked out that it was a long way from our home of Deniliquin, and so we missed a lot of family events and things while we were up there, And again, for a whole range of reasons, after about 12 months, I decided it was probably not for us. And I applied for a Director of Corporate Services role at a council called Wellington Shire in New South Wales, which is about 50 k's out of Dubbo. I got that job, and it was a really, really great role.
And when along this journey did you decide that the CEO life was going to be something you aspired to? Had you started to think about that at this point?
Absolutely, and I'd always thought to myself it was always about progression, and it was always same job, bigger council, or bigger job, smaller council was sort of the chart that I was heading on. But it was interesting. We only spent a relatively short time in Queensland, and as we're driving down to Wellington to this new job and this new adventure, my wife said to me, we're not moving again for a little while. You better buy a house when we get down here. And so we did, and the kids got settled into a good school. It was a great organisation. I was working with Don Ramsland, was the general manager there at the time, and Don's been a stalwart of local government in New South Wales. I learned so much, and we were there for about 3.5 years. And it was actually Don. Again, I've had a lot of leaders in my life that have encouraged me. Don was a former general manager at Cobar Shire. Right. And while I was working for him as his Director of Corporate Services, and had been there for 2 or 3 years and doing great stuff, we had some really good wins while I was there. Don encouraged me. He said, this general manager job out at Cobar, you should apply for it. You're ready for it. It's an interesting space. And sure enough, applied and got the job.
And how long did you spend then at Cobar?
Again, it was a shortish stint. Cobar's an interesting place. The council is the size of Tasmania, 45,000 square kilometres.
Wow.
With a huge population of 5,000 people.
Yeah, and very spread out, or is it in pockets?
Look, the township of Cobar had about 3,500 people when I was there. It's probably different now. But I remember one day, the first week I was on the job, I said, I really want to get out and see all of the staff. And they said, we've got two works depots. I said, beauty, we'll go to the depots tomorrow. And the director at the time looked at me and said, tomorrow? I said, yeah. We'll start at the Cobar depot, and then we'll go to the other depot, which was at a town called Uabalong West. Right. Uabalong West, which is, he said, that's a 3-hour drive by the time we get there and turn around. Yeah, and that was Cobar. Everything was just big in distance. But again, and we had ratepayers out there that had 200,000 square kilometre properties, roads that we were maintaining to one property or going through one property. And we would have our community engagement sessions out on these farms, shearing sheds and all sorts of things. It was an amazing experience. And Cobar's an interesting town, a big mining town. So there's 2 or 3 mining companies there that, mine copper and gold predominantly. So a lot of challenges. But again, really, although the focus of the council was a little different, it was always about, community services. We had a dental studio up there. I learned a lot about autoclaves and dental equipment and stuff like that. So council provided the assets because if we didn't, we wouldn't get a dentist in the town. There was a movie theatre, a picture theatre up there that was going out of business, and the council decided that it was an important facility for our community. So I owned a picture theatre too for a little while there, Chris. It was great fun, Fair. So, again, it really speaks volumes for, what councils do if there's a need within a community.
Yeah, and what about those experiences in those far-flung places do you think stays with you today as a part of the leader that you've become?
I think so. Look, the commonality in every organisation I've worked at is the people. And, you learn to deal with such a big range of different people, and and I love that. That. In my current job, my directors always say, "Gee, you love it when you go down to the depot." Well, that's where I started. I sort of feel a bit of an affiliation with it, but equally, I just love talking to people that are passionate about what they do, and it's rare to find someone that works in local government that doesn't really feel fulfilled with the work that they do. I was out with a litter crew the other day in Wyndham, Nick and Brian, two blokes at Wyndham, and we have a real problem with dump rubbish in the western suburbs, but they love their job and they're making such a difference in the community, and they're so excited with just some changes we've been making around technology and how they get their instructions. But that's been the same forever. In Cobar, we used to have works gangs that used to leave the depot and would be out camping on roadsides for 3 months. 3 months.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, and so I would spend time driving around the Shire going to meet the road gang. So it was an amazing setup. The grader would be towing a fuel tanker, a caravan and a roller, and there'd be, half a dozen people in the team. And that was how they lived and worked.
Goodness. Yeah, it just shows you the breadth of issues that councils deal with around this huge country. I want to jump forward and you're back in Victoria, and I want to ask you what's going on here. When you look at your experience, Surf Coast, Maribyrnong, Surf Coast, Maribyrnong. What happened there, Steve?
The comeback kid, I think, Chris, is what you think. Well, look, and again, we loved being at Cobar. It was a great little town to work at, but I had 3 teenage children by that stage, 3 teenage lads, and schooling was starting to become a bit important. And we made the decision that for the benefit of our kids, it was important that we found somewhere where we could go where it was close to universities and close to jobs and close to things that might be important to our children in their future. And we literally started doing a pros and cons list. Where do we want to live? What was important to us? I'm a mad footy fan, so AFL football was important to us. We wanted to be close to a capital city. We thought we'd like to live near the coast, and we just started, doing circles on maps around where we thought we might like to live. And then I just, again, apply, just started applying for jobs. I applied for a Director of Corporate Services role. So after being the general manager, the CEO equivalent at Cobar for a relatively short time, and I loved the role. I really loved the role, but circumstances meant we were looking for other things. But I applied for the Director of Corporate Services role at Surf Coast Shire. And again, the CEO at the time was a gentleman by the name of Peter Bollen. A lot of people around Victoria would know Pete. And he put me through the ringer, actually. He didn't give me the job first time round. I had first round interviews, and then they decided to go back to the market. And I've never forgiven him for that, because he made me go through a whole second process. And then in the end, I must have wore him down, because he appointed me to the role. And we moved to Torquay, and we still live down on the Bellarine Peninsula today. So
I imagine the size of the role the organisation at Surf Coast compared to Cobar was probably, even though you weren't the general manager at Surf Coast, was probably a pretty significant step up.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was. And all the numbers were basically double. So the staffing numbers, my corporate services budget was about the same as what I had at Cobar. So it's all relative in experience. And then look again, all of the different leadership and management roles that I've had, there's a lot of commonalities. It's managing people, it's understanding your business, it's focusing on the community engagement and customer service. It's always the same. But no, I was moved to Surf Coast and really, really, really loved that. And Surf Coast was undergoing a real change. When we first moved to Torquay, it was a sleepy surfing village. It's not that anymore.
No, it's grown a lot, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I was involved in a lot of really exciting projects there, including the big civic precinct project with the new council offices that, well, they're probably not so new anymore. It's decades ago now. But
they still look pretty impressive, though, compared to a lot of other councils around the place.
Yeah, and when you get into a lot of these councils at the time, the council had very little debt. They were nervous about the growth and activity that was happening, and again, the numbers are all different. But at the time, we had to convince the council to make a really significant investment in council facilities, which is always a challenging thing to do. And a lot of these bigger projects take years of conversation and encouragement and support so that councils can make a really good and often difficult decision. So Surf Coast was great, and I was there for probably 3.5 years or so. And I don't have sour grapes. He was a great man, but I missed out on the CEO role as an internal candidate. I don't think it's any great secret. Mark Davies got the job. He's a great man, Mark, and I learnt so much working with Mark. Yeah. But it sort of dented my pride a little bit, and I thought, well, if I'm not going to get this CEO, and to be blunt, I was still trying to itch the career advancement scratch, and once Mark got the job, I started sort of looking around at other roles and applied for the Director of Corporate Services role at Maribyrnong. And again, for me, another big stretch in a metropolitan council, everything basically double the staff, double the budgets, and a whole different focus. So I've been in very small councils, very remote councils, rural councils. The coastal experience at Surf Coast was amazing. And anyway, I was lucky enough to get the Director of Corporate Services role at Maribyrnong. Vince Haining appointed me there. He was the CEO at the time. And again, a brilliant mind and another person I've learnt so much from. And really, really, really enjoyed Maribyrnong and got there at a really interesting time. The city was undergoing a lot of change. It was gentrifying. Again, the council was in probably a precarious financial situation, and under Vince's leadership and, with my help and support, to really turn around what was, a difficult time into one where we built up good cash reserves. We were dealing with a lot of infill growth and development there. The high-rise buildings were popping out of the ground. The population growth was there, even though that geographically it was pretty controlled. Yeah, it was an amazing place and great councillors, and it was a really good place to work. And I was there as Corporate Services Director for a relatively short time. And again, just thinking about this, the encouragement of leaders. Yeah, Mark had finished up at Surf Coast, and the Surf Coast CEO role was being advertised, and it was Vince that came to me and said, "You need to apply." He said, "Jobs like this don't come around very often," and and with his encouragement, because I wouldn't have. I'm a pretty loyal person, even though my CV probably doesn't suggest that, because I tend to move and shake a bit. But and I felt tremendous loyalty because I'd been given the chance to be there. But it was Vince who encouraged me to apply. I applied for the job, and I was really chuffed when I got the CEO role, because I guess getting a second chance in an organisation, I don't understate how courageous that decision is of the council of the day, because I'm sure people had different opinions about how well I did the job or not. So so I went back to Surf Coast as CEO, and first CEO job in Victoria, the dream job. lived and worked locally. Perfect. Is that the end of the story, Chris? Are we there yet?
It's not the end of the story. No, but clearly you hadn't burned any bridges. But I wanted to ask you about that experience, which was, I think, for a bit over 2 years of being the CEO in the town where you also live. In a large municipality like this one in Victoria.
I would look. It's a challenge to be a local government CEO and live in the same town or same council where you work. And the reason I say that is because sometimes you have some really difficult situations that you've got to deal with on the work front, and then you're going to your kids' footy game in the afternoon, or you're in the supermarket, in the shopping centre an hour later, and you come across some of the people that you've been dealing with. Also, the issue of conflicts of interest bobs up. All of a sudden, I live there. That's my kids go to that school, or I'm affiliated with that club. So you've got to manage that part of the situation.
Do you think that's something that councillors pay enough attention to? Because I've been involved in lots of conversations, particularly in those rural areas where there's an expectation that their CEO also lives in the community. It's easier to get away with it in a metro area because the boundaries really are so blurred, but not so much in the country.
Oh, look, in the country, geographically, you've got some challenges, particularly if your council area is, hundreds of kilometres from other spots. So, I think it's impractical to say that, you should never live in the council where you work. And again, most of the councils that I've worked in, I have lived in the main town centres. But I think, look, I think councils should think carefully before they insist on their CEOs and senior executives living in the towns, because, again, if you want full and frank advice, someone without any conflicts of interest, I think, is in the best position to do that. And, again, when you live in a town, depending how actively you engage with your neighbours and friends, you form relationships, and again, sometimes it's nice when you're in a senior leadership team to not have those conflicts of interest that may, shape the decisions that you're making.
Yeah. Let's shoot forward a little bit. You must have missed that Western Suburbs traffic because you moved on from Surf Coast and back again to Maribyrnong.
Yeah, and look, again, it was as simple as I was at Surf Coast as CEO, and literally I was settling in, Chris. I thought this was my dream job. I'm here for keeps here now. This is going to be great. Vince retired, and he came. He drove down to have a meeting. He said, "Oh, let's catch up for lunch." And he drove down to talk. And I thought, this is a bit unusual. Anyway, we went out. Now I drove him around, and I'm showing him with such great pride all of these great projects we're involved in, and things we were doing, and seeking his advice on stuff. And it was amazing. And then we sat down to have a bite to eat, and he said, "I'm about to drop my resignation in, and I'd really like to tell the councillors that I think there's an opportunity to talk to you further about coming back."
Right.
And again, so the encouragement of people in your life, and so he did. He resigned, and I thought about it long and hard. And again, I felt deeply loyal to Surf Coast because not only had they given me the CEO role, and I lived in the town, and I was pretty invested in the town. And I think it was Rose Hodge, one of the councillors at Surf Coast, and anyone in local government in Victoria would know Rose. I think she said, you got to think about yourself and what's going to be best for you, and this is a great opportunity. So I applied for the job, and the councillors, who were the same councillors that were there when I was the director of corporate, employed me as their CEO. And again, when you look at it from a career perspective, double the staff, double the budgets, in a metropolitan, a bit of profile locally. And I got to meet really great colleagues in the neighbouring councils like yourself, Chris.
Indeed. Nice of you to say. And, the adage here is you don't burn your bridges because you never know when there might be an opportunity to go back.
That's exactly right. And again, I'm pretty proud of that fact, it's often difficult when you leave organisations because, councillors particularly, they think their council area is the centre of the universe and there's nothing outside the boundaries. And that's the way I operate when I'm a CEO or working in a council. I'm very proud of the council where I work. But, sometimes it's really difficult to explain, hey, there's an opportunity here I'm going to take. And for me, at this point in time, it's actually better than where we are at the moment. But to be able to go back to, the same council twice, I'm really proud of that fact. And Maribyrnong was a really great experience. I was there for 7 years as CEO. So
Is that the longest stint on your CV, that 7 years?
Yeah, that's the longest stint. Yeah. Longest stint. Maybe I might catch it shortly, but who knows?
Well, you're approaching 4 years, I think, now at Wyndham, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll be 4 years in August. And as you know, in local government, the maximum 5-year fixed term. So I had a 5-year fixed term at Maribyrnong and finished that 5 years, and the council kindly gave me another contract. And about 2 years into that, so I was there for about 7 years, I was really looking for the next challenge. And I think it's good for organisations. I don't think, I know that there'll be CEOs that you've probably interviewed on this podcast that have been in one organisation for long periods of time. I think it's good for organisations and good for individuals to do what you can and put all 100% effort in while you're there. But I think it's healthy to have change in those leadership roles. And I think 7-8 years is about the right timeline, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. So you've been at Wyndham, as we said, for nearly 4 years, one of the, if not the fastest growing council areas in the entire nation. Now, I want to get an honest answer from you. Have you ever felt, since you took that role on, that you've bitten off more than you could chew?
Absolutely. It's interesting. I think I was fairly confident when, and again, I am really grateful that the council gave me the opportunity. But I've been working in the Western Suburbs for a long time, and I've been familiar with the players in the Western Suburbs for a long time. I thought I had it all sorted out. I thought, this is going to be great. It's going to be a challenge. It's meeting new people. It's going to be, bigger numbers. Again, everything's big at Wyndham. But, I walked in the door and there was a whole different set of jargon. Growth councils are so unique in the local government space. So Wyndham has 17 growth fronts, if you like. PSPs, they kept talking to me about PSPs, and about my second or third day on the job, I actually leaned over to someone and said, "What is a PSP? I've got no idea what you're talking about," because I hadn't worked in a growth council before.
Yeah.
Precinct structure plan, it's the developable area. Oh, okay, got it. Anyway, then all, but it's just the rate of activity at Wyndham is off the charts. It's so super busy. I'm so lucky. We've got such highly skilled, highly competent staff at Wyndham, and they have to be. It is off the charts busy. We don't have a lull. It is constantly busy. When I first started in local government, it's about 27 years ago now, and I was always in the corporate services sort of areas of the business. And you'd remember this yourself. You'd have your budget time, that's busy. And end of financial year is busy, get the reporting stuff. Every quarter you'd have your big, peaks of reporting and busyness. But then you would have some lull times where you could work on the business, where you could, look at engaging with stakeholders and customers. We don't have any downtime at Wyndham. We just don't.
Constant. Yeah.
And so there have been many times where I've thought, gee whiz, I'm out of my depth here, or the complexity of the decisions that have come my way that, I've never experienced before. But again, you've got to have faith in the people around you. You've got to have faith in yourself. Their problem solving is probably their skill that we're best at in local government, isn't it?
Yes, and I wanted to ask you about the people around you. You've shown a very strong willingness to employ other former CEOs in your team of directors. You've had at least 3 of them, I believe, there at Wyndham. Is that partly because you went from a general manager role to a director and back up, or is it just because of the size of the challenges at Wyndham that you need that sort of experience in those director roles?
One of the best pieces of advice I got early on in my career was, try and always employ people that are better than you.
Yeah.
So, I approach every recruitment exercise wanting to get the very best person I can. And, I think it's so important to get people that think differently to you, to work with you. I've got seriously the best executive team I could ever imagine working with me at the moment. I've got two long-term local government folk in Liana Thompson and Eric Brassless, both former CEOs of councils, highly skilled individuals. They know local government. Liana describes herself as a local government tragic, and I know you've had her on your podcast before. But
yes.
Their experiences in local government is so valuable to the roles that they've got, but so valuable to me. And then Amanda Smith has come out of the water industry, and it's her first time in local government, but she's just so committed to community and so committed to the role that she's got, and again brings a different focus and a different mindset to some of us longer term local government people. And then Mark Rossiter, who's our corporate services director, he's got an amazing CV. He's been in such high pressure, high profile roles in all tiers of government, and I think sometimes scratches his head a little bit about some of the things that happen in local government, but has just hit the ground running. And now he describes himself as a local government tragic. So, but if you look at my team, the diversity of thought, the diversity of experience, it just means that the decisions we're making collectively are so much better. They're so much better. And, I think sometimes there's a trap where people feel comfortable employing people in their own likeness, because there is comfort in that, isn't there? Get people around you that are like you. But over my journey, I've found that, I really want people that are capable and competent. I actually want people that can do my job better than me. If they're working in my team, and I secretly hope they all want my job, so that if the day ever comes that I move on, I know, there's ready succession plan there, ready to go. But that's my strongest advice to anyone. Your life changes exponentially when you get highly capable, highly competent people around you, because the muck floats to the top, Chris, generally. If there are problems within the organisation, as you would well know, it tends to end up on my desk. And, with a great team around me, I don't find that happening too much.
I want to ask you about the political nature at Wyndham. Being a bigger council, it's certainly been in the news a bit, perhaps not so much this term, which is good news perhaps, but in the past there have been some challenges. How have you managed to negotiate those political elements? Because the CEO can get drawn in when they don't really want to be, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, I am a big fan of democracy. You wouldn't work in CEO roles in local government if you did not respect and absolutely, respect the office of council. I think it's courageous when people put their name on a how to vote card, stick their hand up for community service, and it is community service. I mean, it's not a money play. You're not becoming a politician in local government, to advance a career or anything. It is absolutely a community service. And so I always come back to the point of, I need to understand the politics, but I don't play the politics. I'm very clear that my job is to support the elected officials to be the very best they can be at their job. I mean, we can talk about the Local Government Act requirements, all those sorts of things. I mean, nuts and bolts, local government is that the CEO's job is to provide the very best recommendation and advice that I can to council. But once the council makes the decision, it's my role to implement their decisions. And look, and from time to time, you will find differences happen within the political arena. And again, I often get sought out for advice from councillors around, interpersonal relationships and political stoushes and things like that. And I'm just very, very careful of not getting embroiled in the politics, but again, providing the good governance advice, providing the support around, how can I help all councillors? And I've got 11 councillors at Wyndham, which is a big number. And I do my best to try and support all 11 as best I can. Actually, I think it was Phil Shanahan once upon a time said, you've got to keep in with the outs.
Right, yes.
And I think that's pretty good advice. I think as a CEO in local government, regardless of what's going on in the political arena, you know what, you've got to treat all councillors equally, and you've got to put your best foot forward when you've got the council together collectively.
Yeah, I think
And
that was
and,
one of
and
the.
you're right. Look. I mean, I want to be proud of the council that I work for, as all council officers do. You know, council officers want to be proud of their organisations, and the leadership from the council is really important. And you know, it's a tough gig. I think it's a tough gig. I would never want to be a councillor, and I say that because I've seen over many decades now councillors dealing with really difficult stuff that impacts on people's lives, and they're having to put their hand up on a Tuesday night in our case and make tough decisions at times. And but you know, thank God people put their hand up to become councillors, and thank God we've got people that are willing to do it, because, as I said, particularly in our state, it's not a particularly well-paid job. And, you know, the hours that some of our councillors are putting in is immense. You know, I think in the lead up to the last election, which was last year, we were sort of advising at some of our events, you probably need to allow up to 20 hours. And I've had a few councillors come back to me and say, I think you're a bit light on. It's way more than that. By the time you put in reading, going to community events and just turning up to the meetings, it's way more than that.
Yes, the VLGA's recent councillor census put, I think, a minimum 30-hour figure on that commitment. Steve, we're at a time in Victoria in local government where we've never had so many monitors in place. The issue of councillor conduct is coming up all the time. Do you think our sector has a conduct problem?
I think life is complex at the moment, isn't it? I mean, it seems like it's in the past now, but the COVID experience had a big impact on the world. And I'm not sure we've recovered from that period. There seems to be a lot of anger out there, doesn't there? A lot of anger, a lot of uncertainty. You know, we're in a cost of living crisis, and we see that in the western suburbs of Melbourne every single day. I think the level of complexity in local government has increased. Level of complexity across the board has increased. So I'm not making excuses for people, but I think the world is changing all the time, and I think at times, you know, the behaviours of elected officials and the behaviours and the conduct of stakeholders in community, you know, of people in community, of people within organisations. I've noticed a real change in the last, 5 to 10 years, and I think there's a bit of an entitlement mentality out there at the moment that is having an impact on tiers of government.
Yeah.
But again, I often think back at this. Maybe social media makes it more prominent now. In the 30 odd years or 27 years I've worked in local government, I've always seen conflict between councillors. I've always seen it play out in different ways. Maybe it's more prominent today because all of our meetings are recorded. Because all of the behaviour is tracked.
There's a spotlight. Yeah,
there's a spotlight on it, and look, there are particular media outlets that love shining a spotlight on it.
Yeah.
I think it's a complex job too. I mean, you don't need any particular skill set to become a councillor, and these are big, complex businesses. Wyndham's about to have $1 billion of revenue. It's a big business. 2,200 staff. They're complex, big businesses, and anyone can be elected to be a councillor, and it's probably an unrealistic expectation to think that elected officials can come in and stay calm and understand the environment they're in.
So if I can play devil's advocate, there's you're right, it's more complex. There's more of a spotlight on the roles and the way people go about it. But some would suggest that spotlight has highlighted an inflexibility in the way local government goes about its business, and it needs to change. Do you think there's some merit in that?
I was reflecting on this recently. When I was at Wellington Council up in New South Wales, which was a long time ago, we set up a strategic alliance between Cabonne and Blaney councils in Wellington. And I was thinking about that, councils working together. only in the last 6 months, I've been involved in dialogue with a number of councils in Victoria around strategic alliance. And I thought,
Yeah.
gee whiz, the
Everything
circles
old's new
keep
again.
turning. Yeah. But so to say that, councils need to pull up their socks and look at doing things differently, I think we've been doing that forever. We've embraced new technology over, whenever things change, and you could look at it at a very base level. I mean, the quality of the machinery and the equipment that we've got that is allowing us to do the work that we do means we're more efficient and more effective. The answer is yes to your question. We have to keep getting better. We have to keep improving, and it's one of the main pillars that we look at Wyndham all the time. We can't keep doing the same thing today and expect that we're going to be successful in the future. So we're always looking for those opportunities to improve, and that will never change. If you're talking to me in 20 years' time, my God, I hope you're not. But if you are, I wouldn't mind betting we're saying the same things. Geez, it's tough in local government. Gee, we've got to keep working harder and pulling up our socks and trying to improve things. I don't think that will ever change. I think rate capping in Victoria, I can't let this moment go by without climbing onto the soapbox. It is dumb policy. It is really, really, really hurting councils. 9 years of rate capping now. At Wyndham, we believe we've lost in the order of $250 million of revenue that we would have put into community services that we don't have. So I could say to you, we've got a $250 million inbuilt efficiency that we've had to deal with over the last decade, because that is revenue we have not been able to levy. And, when you put a growth council into the mix, all of our services are people-based. And when our population is growing exponentially, I do claim we are the fastest growing council in the country, not one of. I claim, even though Rosette Milton will argue with me, but that's by the by. But, we're being told we can increase our rate levels by less than CPI. I think the worst year, CPI was tracking at 7% and we got 1.75%.
Yeah.
So not only are we not keeping up with inflation, and guess what? We don't buy a lot of milk and bread, Chris.
Correct.
We buy a lot of concrete and emulsion and stuff that's been going up far greater than the rate of CPI.
Yeah.
And then throw into the mix, 3 or 4 or 5% population growth. We're in dire straits. This is a serious situation for Victoria, and I just hope the government, if they're not going to remove rate capping, at least have a look at how it's levy, how the rates are derived, because to compare a Wyndham with a Yarra Yambiak or a West Wimmera is just nonsense, but we get the same rate cap.
Yeah, and eventually what's happening in New South Wales will likely happen in Victoria, where you've got councils looking for up to 90% rate increases because of those very issues that you've
this just flies in the face of good management. I don't think there's any council that would like to be talking to their community about that sort of level of rate increase. In the past, when we used to build budgets, we used to look at what's the service need, where are our pressures, what's the revenue we need, and then we would set a rate that would meet those needs. But in those days before rate capping, I don't think I ever had a conversation with a councillor group where they were saying just rip the rates up as high as you can get it. There was always downward pressure on rate increases. But now it's the opposite. Now we're told, here's your level of rate revenue. The rate revenue line item is the biggest revenue item that we've got in local government, and now that's fixed. We work backwards now. We say, how much money have we got and how do we cut our cloth to suit? And that's a real challenge, I think.
All right. There's one thing left to talk about, and you talked about, whether we'll be talking about these things in 20 years from now. Where are you going to be in 20 years from now? What have you got left that you want to do in local government or elsewhere?
Look, I don't know, Chris. I really don't know. I'm really enjoying the role that I've got today. We're active. I'm engaged. I've got a great team around me. I've got a great council, that are making really good decisions. And look, you said it. This time, in about 12 months' time, hopefully the council will be talking to me about contracts. But you never know. Maybe I might win Tats Lotto on Saturday night, and might try and improve my golf handicap. Who knows?
And what about the Hawks this year, Steve?
Aren't they looking good? Gee, I'm loving those few extra big bodies in the back line, and Look, I hate being flag favourites after round one, Chris, as you said.
I
But
agree.
no, I think you and I have loved the Hawks for a long, long, long time. I think the only way is up. So whether it's this year, I reckon the next three-peat's coming our way.
Oh, wow.
We'll
That's a
keep a
bit...
lid on it. Just keep that between you and me, will you?
You've just taken the lid right off. Yes, that's something we have in common. And there's some other CEOs around that have made the very wise choice to follow the Hawks as well.
Yeah, well, as you say, you've got to be a smart person to be a CEO in local government. So let's hope. Actually, it's interesting. The sector's changing, isn't it? And I love your podcast, Chris. Congratulations on all the work that you do.
Thank you.
And, it's so busy at Wyndham. So I rely on your podcast as I drive into work to catch up on the local government gossip. And a lot of CEOs leaving the sector, a lot of vacancies at the moment. And, as someone that's becoming one of the older more longer-term CEOs in the sector, which I look back when I first got the CEO job at the Surf Coast, and the longer-term CEOs that I was really looking up to, the John Bennys, the Nolene Duffs, there's a long list of them, as you know, and a lot of them aren't there anymore. And I'm looking around saying, who do I turn to now for that, wise counsel that I used to get from some of these really experienced CEOs in the sector? But isn't it exciting for up-and-coming CEOs that these opportunities are there? And look, I think the sector's got some challenges, but I think we're in good shape. There's a lot of really good people in our sector. I think the work of MAV and VLGA is fantastic in supporting the challenges that we're faced with at the moment. But look, we've got to be optimistic, don't we?
We do.
Keep looking to the future.
We do. I think that's a nice note to end on. Steve, I've loved having a chat to you. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know you're very, very busy there in the fastest growing council in Australia.
Thank you, Chris. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks for joining me for this latest instalment in the Well-Travelled Executive Series. Don't forget to check out the other episodes in the series from the Local Government News Roundup, Australia's #1 podcast for news and interviews about the local government sector in Australia and beyond. The podcast is brought to you by the Victorian Local Governance Association, the national broadcaster on all things local government, with support from Symphony 3, simple, connected customer experiences. Our program is produced in the city of Greater Geelong on the land of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I hope you'll join me again soon. Until then, thanks for listening and bye for now. I'm thrilled to welcome Symphony 3 to the Local Government News Roundup family. If you're a local council, you know how challenging it can be to manage data across all your different systems. That's where Symphony 3 comes in. They've developed Smart Glue, a platform that integrates over 55 council systems, automating data flow without the need for manual work. It turns confusion into simplicity. With Smart Glue, councils save time, reduce errors and empower staff to focus on what really matters. Their clients see a real difference, up to 20% boost in productivity, with savings of over $30,000 per integration every year. Symphony 3 helps councils work smarter, faster and more efficiently, all while better supporting the communities they serve.